Welcome to the Wireless LAN News Desk for August 2nd, 2019. My name is Tom Carpenter. I'm the CTO at CWNP. And this week in the news, I have three things I want to talk about. First of all, the Wi-Fi Alliance announced some time ago a naming convention to use for their certified devices. And they chose to go with Wi-Fi 6 for 802.11ax, and of course Wi-Fi 5 for 802.11ac. Now, the interesting thing is that when it initially came out, there was some discussion in the wireless LAN community, the engineers and technologists who work with wireless technologies, about the benefits of the naming convention. Some were for it, some were against it, some are strongly opposed to it, some are strongly for it, and a lot of people are in the middle. Well, there's an interesting article that I found interesting for a couple of reasons. It's at Tech Target, and it's called "The Industry Grapples with New Wi-Fi Naming Conventions." Now, here's the thing that I really liked about this article. There are 3 people named in this article that are CWNEs. And then there are 2 other people named as well. One of them I know knows about us, and the other one is an IT manager, and it's interesting to see their take on it. One CWNE in this article says, you know what, it's just marketing hype. Another CWNE says, well, I think it can be good for explaining things to users. And another CWNE takes kind of the very middle ground approach, saying that it can be beneficial to users, but it introduces a lot of confusion. What we're dealing with here is the reality that a Wi-Fi 6 device is not a Wi-Fi 6 device, is not a Wi-Fi 6 device. In other words, there are many different categories or classes of Wi-Fi 6 devices. You could have a single stream Wi-Fi 6 device, a 2-stream, a 4-stream, and so on. And so you can have Wi-Fi 6 devices with different streams. You could have a Wi-Fi 6 device that only supports certain channel widths and not others. The point is, it depends on how it's implemented, what it actually supports. Now, of course, it has to support certain things in order to be Wi-Fi 6 certified in the first place. But it is important to know that Wi-Fi 6 is not Wi-Fi 6 is not Wi-Fi 6, just like Wi-Fi 5 is not Wi-Fi 5 is not Wi-Fi 5. Now, one person in this article compared it to automobiles. So you can get an automobile in an SE version, an LE version, an XT version, and so on. Well, that's very true, and consumers seem to be able to grapple with that and understand it just fine. However, there really isn't a Wi-Fi 6 SE version and LE version. That is to say, there's not a Wi-Fi 6 limited edition, which is single stream, and a Wi-Fi 6 moderate edition, which is 2-stream, etc. and so forth. And so there's nothing really like that in the naming convention to help users understand it. Instead, guess what we have to do? We have to go back to technical issues. We have to say it's a Wi-Fi 6 device, and it's tri-band, and it's 4-stream, and it's on and on the list goes. So really the only thing we did is we changed the name from 802.11ax to Wi-Fi 6. Now, 802.11ax, as this article points out, is more syllables. That is true. And Wi-Fi 6 is fewer syllables. That is true. But other than that, it's just a name. Now, the reality is they do refer to different things, and this article also points that out thanks to a CWN expert that commented in the article. The difference is that 802.11ax is the standard amendment to the IEEE 802.11 standard, and Wi-Fi 6 is a device that's been certified to be able to interoperate with other devices certified as Wi-Fi 6. So there is a difference between these two things, and that is important to keep in mind. Therefore, if we talk about 802.11ax, we could say we're generally talking about the capabilities of the standard, which may or may not be implemented in any device anywhere. And when we're talking about Wi-Fi 6, we are talking about real devices. This has been an interesting challenge in the 802.11 history. Throughout the history of 802.11, there have been many things in the standard that have never been implemented. And when we say, hey, this is an 802.11 device, we have to ask, well, what part of 802.11? This is where the Wi-Fi Alliance came into play. They gave us certified 11G devices, certified 11N devices, and so forth. And we knew that they met some minimum subset of the standard. That's still true with Wi-Fi 6. So another good way to think of it then is that 802.11ax is the standard, and the things in it may or may not be implemented, and Wi-Fi 6 is real. These are devices that actually exist, but there's still variability in what those devices implement, so we have to keep that in mind. Now, the next thing is an article in CNET. How fast is Wi-Fi 6? Here's our very first speed test. Well, they've got a 40% rate in the title. When we get on down into the article, it looks like it's closer to around 30%. And the important thing to keep in mind is they're evaluating consumer routers, but still it's 11AX versus 11AC. And they saw about a 30% or so increase in performance. Now, let's assume that we could see that 30% increase in performance in a production enterprise wireless LAN. Or let's be conservative and say we see a 25% increase in performance. You really have to step back and ask, what is the value of that if I'm already on 802.11ac? Well, the answer is if your Wi-Fi performance is slow today, meaning your wireless LAN is saturated and heavily utilized, and people are complaining about performance or transfers are slow, access is slow, things like this, then that 25% could very well put you over the edge. But you could also be put over the edge by having some design solutions, re-engineering the existing network in such a way so that it puts you over the edge. So what I'm saying is not avoid Wi-Fi 6 or avoid 11AX. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying don't implement it as the next 12 to 18 months unfold. What I am saying is don't implement it and think just implementing it's going to solve your problems. It's still going to come down to good design. So I don't care if you're using Wi-Fi 5, 11AC, Wi-Fi 6, 11AX, or even 11N. Whatever you're using, if it's well designed, it will perform much better than if it is not. And so the biggest benefit you're going to get is proper design. Many of these networks that suffer in performance are not suffering because they're stuck on an 11AC network and they just need 11AX. No, they're suffering because of poor design. Implement proper design and you get much better performance. Finally, a little piece in the news at cnbc.com about 5G. They suggest in the title, you don't need to buy a 5G phone and probably won't for a few years. Well, what they're talking about is the reality of 5G rollouts. So they give the example of the fact that Verizon is suggesting that they will have about 50% of the country covered in 2020. Others are suggesting that they'll have full coverage by that same time. There are mergers taking place or attempting to be taking place between T-Mobile and Sprint and things like this that will impact 5G's rollout. And of course, we need 5G devices. There aren't very many out there just yet, which is to be expected early on. So here's the big thing. The big thing they're saying is the benefits that 5G brings may not be that big of a benefit right away because you may not even have network access where you are. So the big key here is to understand that 5G is going to take time to roll out. And I would say by 2021 or 2022, when you get your hands on a 5G device, it'll just work in most places, certainly major cities, even moderately sized cities and so forth. Rural areas may still be a problem getting proper 5G coverage, just like sometimes it's a problem getting LTE 4G coverage today. That's just reality in those rural areas because of the fact that there's so much open space and so few customers in that open space, and therefore the financial benefit of getting good solid coverage there, just like you have in metro areas, is not as much for the providers. So the thing to watch for 5G is when you get the coverage where you need the coverage, and then you may be able to get the performance gains. Also, remember that early adopters are going to get really good performance gains, and then the later adopters will not see those same performance gains because the network will get more and more saturated. And yes, they'll upgrade infrastructures, they'll do the best they can to improve, but always the reality is without a change in the highest speed capabilities of the network, when more people use it, each person gets poorer performance. That's just reality. That's the way our wired networks work in our companies. That's the way our wireless networks work in our companies. That's the way 5G will work in every other network as well. So keep in mind that when you see an early adopter saying, wow, look at these speeds I'm getting on 5G, realize they're one of 7 people using it. Okay, that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the point. And so what about when they're one of 7,000 people using it? Obviously, that's going to change things because we're not just talking about the radios. We're talking about the back-end infrastructure and all the rest that needs to transmit that data through the network to the internet, out the other side of the internet, through those networks, etc., and so forth. So there has to be a dose of reality along the way. Well, that's all I have for the news today. I thank you for joining me. If you haven't registered yet, go to cwnp.com, click on the conference link to register for Wi-Fi Trek that's coming up in Nashville in September. You want to get your registration in so you make sure that you're able to attend this Wi-Fi conference and wireless conference where we'll be talking about all things wireless. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week.